Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books, the podcast which looks at the stories behind the food from our favourite A-list food writers. I'm Julie Smith and I'm linking the thinking about what we eat and who we are to create a deeper connection with food. This week I'm with chef Rob Howell, whose book Root tells the story of one of the new stars of the Bristol sustainable food scene. Root, the restaurant, comes from the stable of Josh Eggleton, a long-time advocate of the Field to Fork movement at the Michelin-starred Pony and Trap, where Rob was head chef. And Josh is also co-founder of Eat, Drink, Bristol Fashion Festival, which promotes the importance of food sustainability and became the first ever festival to receive a gold standard catering mark from the Soil Association.
So many people that care about what they're doing and have a real sense of, well, just everything, community, like produce, an understanding and really, want to do everything they can. It's not just the Michelin star restaurants, it's everything in between, from street food to that kind of Michelin star restaurant. And I feel like Bristol hits the note every time kind of thing.
Root is one of the cool new restaurants in Wapping Wharf's box park style shipping container village. And when I spoke to Rob, it had just opened again after the winter lockdown. He told me what that looks like.
Shipping containers, all put together. There's like two sections, cargo 1, cargo 2, and it is made of a massive array of florists to wine bars, to restaurants, to barbers, just to nice shops, to be honest. And it's right by the harbour side behind the M Shed, and it's just a real special place to be. Any time of day, but especially now, it feels great to see people back enjoying the space.
And of course, for so many people to be flocking as soon as we're allowed to come and eat roots, eat plants, tells the whole story of what's happening in Bristol. So let's unpack that. First of all, Root turned overnight from chicken shed to a plant-based restaurant. Didn't tell anyone about it, didn't make any great hoo-ha about it, just it came out of Josh not being able to get enough good stuff. Getting good chicken is really hard for people who really care about provenance. Tell us about that, because you were there. You've been with Josh through the whole journey.
Yes, so he opened, I was at the Pony and Trap at the time, so out in Magna, which I was there for about 6 years or 7 years in total. He opened, when Cargo first opened, he went there and he'd always, in Bristol, we've got a chicken shop called Miss Millie's, which is kind of like a KFC kind of style thing. And he kind of wanted to do his own take on that, just celebrating proper British, like free-range organic chickens at their best, from chicken salads to roast chicken, to everything in between. What it ended up being was just the supply of chickens was very difficult. The actual idea of frying this high welfare chicken, because the skin was a lot thicker, the fat was a lot heavier, it wasn't actually what people wanted. And in the end, people weren't willing to, the comparisons were only these places like KFC, which is a lot cheaper. And so unfortunately it didn't go the way as planned. And then he was like, let's change it. He knew it wasn't working and came to me. I was looking for my own restaurant at the time, and he said, I've got an idea to change it to vegetables. What do you think? And we sat down and I kind of wrote a proposed menu, and he said, yeah, like, it's yours, kind of go for it. So we closed on the Saturday night chicken shed, and got straight in the kitchen. And I think we opened Monday night at 5:00, and kind of people turned up for chicken. And it was a very good night. It was a very good. And
night. Nobody batted an eye really, because the quality was there, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Yeah, and obviously, like, the word got out then, and it was it kind of went for there. We still, I think, for the first year, we still had people turning up saying, can I get a chicken burger, and so kind of walking into the restaurant. But no, that's ended now, which is nice. So everyone knows we're about vegetables. Yeah. Bristol is really quite an extraordinary place, isn't it? You've got Tom Hunt's Poco leading the way in changing sustainable practice and making it utterly delicious, and really making it part of the national conversation. Josh was really at the forefront of that a long time ago. Tell us a little bit about Josh Eggleton and the Pony and Trap, and where we are now with the Pony.
So I joined in 2012, I think, at the Pony and Trap. So they got their star in 2009. Josh opened the Pony and Trap, I can't remember when. I think it was
2006.
Yes. So it all happened quite quickly. He was only 22 when he first opened it. They opened it up with Holly, front of house's sister, and it started off as they'd have lasagna on the menu. It was very much kind of, they tried to keep it simple, and it just kind of grew and grew, like Root is now. As such, the difference in 4 years of a restaurant when you're learning and you're growing is unbelievable. So I think they started off with that same process and went from there, and it just naturally evolved. And the bigger the team came, when I joined, we'd have 4 of us in the kitchen, and yeah, he's self-taught, and it ended up kind of turning from this kind of village pub to a Michelin star restaurant in 2009.
And when you joined as head chef, you retained that Michelin star, and that sort of says a lot about what kind of food you're cooking. And we'll go into your journey in a minute. But just before we do, just to say that, the pony is a symbol of that Bristol ethical attitude to eating. It's now turned into, a gardening club. It's all about fermentation and foraging. Tell us about the restaurant scene in Bristol.
It's just, in the last 10 years, completely changed. So I grew up in Somerset. Moved away quite quick. When I was 18, I moved straight to London to work there and did a few bits in between. And I was looking at moving closer to home, and I remember Googling best restaurants in Bristol, because I was like, where shall I aim for? And at the time, there was only a few that kind of popped up. And I remember I knew the Pony and Trap because it's basically in between where I grew up and Bristol. So I went straight for giving Josh a call. But in the last 10 years, it's just every year on year, these restaurants open, but the quality is it's always there. It's never there's so many people that care about what they're doing and have a real sense of, just everything, community, produce, an understanding, and really, want to do everything they can. But it's amazing. It's not just the Michelin star restaurants, it's everything in between, from street food to that kind of Michelin star restaurant. And I feel like Bristol hits the note every time, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And baking bread came out of Josh's ideology as well during COVID, to really boost with pop-ups the hospitality sector. There's loads and loads of going on, and that underpins everything that's going on at Root. Yeah. So just whizzing through your journey, you went to catering college, and you then went to work at Goodfellows under Adam Fellows, and then to work with French chef Pascal Proyat. Tell us, before we go into your first food moment, about that moment when you're with Pascal and you're watching the Italian chef cooking leftovers for a staff dinner, and you had that real eureka moment.
I think we used to have 12 chefs in the kitchen. I was the youngest by far, and it was daunting. I used to get up for work about 5:30. I'd get into the kitchen at 7 o'clock and just kind of head down and do what I was told. But I just remember watching everyone and just being completely blown away by how people handled food, by their knowledge, by just everything. And there was quite a few Italian chefs in the kitchen, and they just knocked together this star food with some scraps of red mullet, and they made the pasta. We had a massive pass, and they made the pasta on the pass. It was just those simple ingredients turning it into something so special. And I'd kind of never tasted food like that before. That really pasta, just like you've never tasted. And I was, completely blown away. Actually, at the time, I remember thinking I wanted to go work I bought loads of Italian cookbooks after that and wanted to become like a pasta chef. But that was, I went through a lot of phases in my career, I'd say. But no, it was outstanding.
Yeah. And then you went to Ondine in Edinburgh, but it was at the Epicurean back in your home base where it was almost like a circular journey back to your holidays. You used to go to northern France, to the markets of northern France, and where you saw that produce, the quality of the ingredients that great flavours and great cooking is really all about. Is that what happened at the Ethicurian? Tell us about that.
It was outstanding. The quality of produce around you, and the understanding of where it all comes from, and watching. They have the gardener there, Mark, who runs the walled garden. I remember the moment where he brought in some leeks, and I'd watched these leeks grow, and I was thinking, these leeks have been here. And I said, when did you plant these? And it was in the summer, and it was like October, and they'd been growing for 6 months, and he'd nurtured them throughout these months. And I think, how is it even possible that it costs this little for someone doing so much work? And leeks are one of those things that in many kitchens will sit there, rot, and be chucked in the bin, and it's fine because it's just a leak. And that was kind of that moment of understanding where you can't waste anything.
Yeah. And that everything is so special, and that flavour comes from nurture. Yeah, let's go into your first food moment then. I mean, something so simple as cashew and chickpea hummus with raw vegetables or crudités. That's all about produce, isn't it? Tell us about that.
So it kind of, first food moment, it was the kind of the same principle as what we were talking about, the understanding of produce. In a restaurant, I always find these, you look at restaurants and you get these words thrown around of sustainability and produce driven and seasonal menus, and it's very easy to say these words, but I think the moment in Root, where it had been open a couple of years, of actually understanding the difference between finding produce and we use these growers, Sam and Becky, who used to run a restaurant in Bristol called Birch, which is one of my all-time favourite restaurants. And they sold it up. They now make cider as Wildling cider, and they grow a very small amount of produce now, and were lucky enough to use them. And they would bring this produce in. And obviously, in a kitchen, you get excited about your fish, your meat, and oh wow, look how big this scallop is. I remember the moment where he brought in some peas, some sugar snap peas, some cauliflowers. It was some radishes, and it had just been picked. And we stood around the back of the kitchen during service and tasted them, and it was just another like kind of eureka moment. It sounds very but it was unbelievable, and I thought I can't do anything to this to make it taste any better than it does in that moment. So we kind of washed it as much as needed, put them in the fridge, and made this hummus, and we had to serve it. And I don't think maybe it's not people's number one. Why would you go to a restaurant and serve raw vegetables? But they're just. It had to be had like that. Yeah. And it was the brilliance of then learning that, well, you can't just order vegetables the next day from another company and do the same dish, because it won't be the same. So the dish only lasted the night, we sold it, and then moving on, we did something else. And just that understanding of, you can't always recreate these things with anything. You need to work around your produce, and that's what we kind of do now, and we've learned to do that, which is
and it's extraordinary. It's so simple. And, Alice Waters sort of, created that whole revolution in food when she came back from Paris in the 1970s, when she's just a, gap year kid. And it was that moment where she picked up a vegetable in a Parisian market and had that same moment. And, created this revolution. It's quite extraordinary. Your second food moment is pretty much that, isn't it? It's about a beetroot. It's about picking up this extraordinary vegetable and saying, okay, wow, how can this inspire me? Tell us about the second food moment.
The food moment's the beetroot dish, which is like, we could call it like blackberries, hazelnuts and beetroot. So it's the idea of, it's been on the menu since day one in a form. It's changed through the years with with my cooking, with the team's cooking, and with Root as a whole. I think it kind of sums us up, which is it taking a vegetable and trying to make it interesting, do something slightly innovative, and then actually making a tasty dish out of it, which is kind of the number one priority. So we ferment some, which is absolutely delicious. We grate it, salt it, leave it out for 5 to 7 days submerged in its own juice, and then with the beetroot you end up with this like jam like beetroot, which is like sweet, salty. It's absolutely delicious. And then we roast the beetroots in their skin, and serve it with some blackberries and the hazelnuts, and then we pickle some as well. So seaweed oil as well. And it was just the understanding when we first started doing it. We would cut the beetroot perfectly. We would cut little pickled discs out of it and stack them up on paper and kind of make a little tian as such. And now it's very much there's no wastage in it. It's all natural, and it's not thrown on the plate, 'cause that sounds bad, but it's just that evolution of I don't know. I've kind of gone past. The food looks nice because it's natural, and I've kind of gone towards that almost river cafe style of food, and that's kind of what I aspire to now, rather than that background of like Michelin food, which I do love, and it has its place, but for me, I don't aspire to that anymore. I've kind of got different priorities as such in my food, I think.
But you're still layering the kind of flavours, and you're giving really wow ideas to people. I look through your book and I think, well, this is what I would do if I were going to do a really posh dinner party for people that, and just wow them with and say this is purely plant-based and they won't ever have had anything like it.
No, definitely. What the book try to just show what is. It's not like, oh, I'll come home. Like, there is some dishes in there that you can knock up out of the pantry, I'd like to think. My mum's cooked about 15 dishes out of the book now on her own, and she sends me a message, and it's brilliant. And I wanted to create a book in which that could happen. But at the same time, I'm sat next to all my books now. Throughout my career, books definitely made me into the chef I am today. Yeah. That understanding, that insight into someone's mind and how they do it. So I wanted to be able to give that knowledge of what I've learned and how I treat these vegetables, which it doesn't mean you might cook the exact dish out of the book, but hopefully it will lead on to going, oh, well, that's an interesting way of doing it. And like platforms for layers in dishes kind of thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And your third food moment is about a dressing. You talk about it, it's the cod with gem lettuce, pancetta and hazelnut dressing. But you chose the third food moment because of the dressing, didn't you?
Yes. So this was a dressing. So I started off in the kitchen. When I was at college, I went into Goodfellows in Wales, which at the time was AA Restaurant of the Year. 2 rosettes. Adam had just come from having a Michelin star in Charlton House. And it was like, wow to me then, kind of. So I went in and asked for a summer job. And they took me straight on, and I went straight in there. And I had I've got it somewhere. I've got a notebook, and I kind of, I stuck like 3 stars on the front of it. I'd printed out a Gordon Ramsay quote, I think, and I was a proper little, I just loved chefing, and it was kind of everything to me then. And I went in, and this was the first recipe I wrote down in this book. And we still use it to this day in the kitchen. So I just love the idea that some things just don't get old. Some food doesn't age, or you go, oh, that looks silly now. Or it's just about like classic, just flavors that work, and they work with anything. And this dish it's special in a sense of, as in Goodfellows was a seafood restaurant. I worked at 101, which was a seafood restaurant, and then luckily enough, worked at Ondine up in Edinburgh. And I didn't really know it at the time, but their ethics of using the fish they do and the way they treated it was just the best teachings I could have had without even knowing, kind of thing. And the sustainability behind it, of these dayboat fish, or of using the seasons and getting the best possible fish and shellfish. It was just a pure luxury. So now I absolutely love cooking fish. We still have fish on the menu. And this dish is kind of a nice summary of like almost everything I've learned through the restaurants. Yeah. I was lucky enough to work with Nathan Outlaw as well. I did some stages at his restaurants when I was, I think, 16. Wow. I went down to Rock before he got 2 stars at his restaurant in the St Endoc Hotel. And I remember him saying, why would you... He bakes a lot of fish, and he kind of said, why would you want the fish to taste of anything rather than the fish? Yeah. He said, why would you baste it in loads of butter and make it taste like butter when it's so beautiful? And I kind of now love that concept and work with that. So most of the fish in the restaurant is simply baked in an oven. And I absolutely love it. Yeah,
it's all about understanding where the ingredients come from, really respecting their journey to the plate, and then giving them an opportunity to speak for themselves. That's what great cooking is, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Your 4th food moment is about nostalgia. It's about the impact of really spending your wonderful holidays with your parents in northern France, the markets.
Yeah. Yes. At the time, I don't think in fact, like, writing this book, I don't think I realised what an impact almost those holidays had on my food, my outlook on food, and maybe where I wouldn't have actually gone into what I'd done without those holidays. We used to get the ferry over to the north of France. My mum was scared of flying, and so we'd drive up to Dover and go over to Calais, and we wouldn't go too far. I have a brother and a sister. In a tiny car, we'd pack up, and we wouldn't drive too far because we'd be screaming the whole way, basically. So we kind of made our way through northern France and Brittany, Normandy, and we've kind of done a lot of it now. And now we go, as adults, we go back, well, when we could, and hopefully we will very soon. But just... it was all about food. We'd get there, unpack. Dad would already have planned and looked at the map to see where the local markets were. We're going here on Tuesday, here on Thursday. In between, we'd go to the supermarchés and just spend hours looking at like the incredible, like their supermarkets still to this day. It's like my favourite thing to walk around.
Me too.
And just, you can spend hours, especially now with enjoying alcohol and looking at their wines, it adds an extra hour on for sure. So the holidays just revolved around that and going to these markets and seeing this produce. And obviously back when we were younger, I didn't cook much of it, but when I started to cook, and I'd go over and we'd buy some scallops, and even when I was like 15, 16, and I'd try and open these scallops and kind of have no clue, and it's kind of gone from there. And this dish, the brownie, a very simple classic, but it was one of those ones. We went to a little a restaurant kind of grill, and we had this kind of, we were all a bit like daunted by this. We can't really speak French. We obviously do our best, but not very well, with 3 young kids. And they sat us down and gave us this salad, and we kind of turned our nose up, but it was just beautifully dressed in that classic French kind of Dijon vinaigrette. We wolfed it down, had our main course, and then for dessert they brought out these brownies. And this is just my kind of take on that brownie of pure indulgence, and just something simple that kind of that reminiscent of these holidays that we just talk about to this day still, which is amazing that food can do that, and that's the beauty of all of it. Through everything, of enjoying the food, of where the produce it comes from, the people you meet, but the fact that you can just go on for years talking about these moments of where you were, and you remember every single aspect of it is so special.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, to go right back to the beginning, Bristol feels like it's already in the 22nd century. It's so it's forward thinking in terms of, sustainability and flavour and bringing it all together in a really delicious offer. France, not so. Very stuck in its ways. It's still just the same as it always was, which, is wonderful in many ways. But, the clotted cream, for example, the masses of butter that you're using in the brownie, how do you square that with what you're doing with the plants? Where's the sustainability message in there? Do you use high welfare dairy?
We use Chew Valley dairy, so it is literally on our doorstep again. We try and use, cheese-wise, we've got a cheesemonger down at Wapping Wharf, Bristol cheesemonger, Rosie. She's absolutely amazing. So she only uses British cheeses, and she is outstanding on every level. She goes to all the dairies herself to pick up most of the cheese and stuff. So we use her for any kind of aspects of cheese we're putting on a dish. And then we have a few friends, suppliers. We have one in Umbley, same in this Chew Valley, and they produce cheese, used cheese, which we use very heavily on our menu. We try, we don't actually cook with that much butter anymore. Milk, we kind of stay away from it. We get a lot of vegans in, which is great, and we've kind of learned along the way to the base of all of our food is basically vegan, and we add if we want to, which means that most vegans, like our whole menu is pretty much vegan, which is always a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, that is the point, isn't it? About you've got a very interested, activist, millennial crowd in Bristol who are demanding better food, they're demanding better flavour, they're demanding a better attitude. And it's a wonderful relationship, isn't it, between chef and customer, where you're both pushing the thinking.
Definitely. And I think I have that side of Bristol and those people being there has made an impact on how we cook at the restaurant, which I think is a positive thing. Like, we still do what we want in the sense of, like, we will cook with butter, we will have fish on the menu. If there is a meat that we want to serve and we feel is correct, we will. But also, I've completely changed the way I cook day to day because of those people coming into the restaurant, which I think is a really nice way of how it works. It's a two-way thing where they're teaching me, I'm still doing what I love, but it's actually made a very positive impact on the whole thing. And like we said, we served about 600 customers this week. It's a great thing to know that most of those customers ate solely vegan food, when probably 80% of them, or even 90% of them, are not vegans, but they still loved it. And it's that finding that balance of enjoyment, indulgence, and kind of vegan food is a nice balance to be able to hit, I think.
Thanks for listening. You can buy Root by Rob Howell and all the books featured on Cooking the Books by clicking on the bookshop tab at juliesmith.com. And while you're there, do sign up for the newsletter to keep up with all my news. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and I'll see you next week when I'm talking to Syrian cook Anas Atassi about food from the old country in his book Sumac.